Welcome back to Sports Betting Truth, recapping week 1 of college football, moving on to week 2 with my picks. So to recap week 1, I had to cut my trip to Las Vegas short on Saturday night. I had to leave in the middle of the Saturday games. I was coming down with food poisoning, so I had to watch the Sunday and Monday games from home. But recapping week 1 right here, it wasn't a good one. Lost 6.3 units for a grand total of minus 6 units for the trip. It wasn't so much that I didn't pick well. I was about 50-50 on the picks themselves, but it was the unit sizes. The higher unit plays did not do well. Looking into here, it was the blender that did best in week 1. Up 3 units. The ATM, the other key indicator, down 5.4 units, and the combo was minus 1.2. When the blender margin edge was 1.5 or higher, as seen in the key here, it was actually at 5.6 units for an ROI of 16%. So that's going to be our key for week 2. On the money line side, we have a lot of losses, but that was mainly because the Tennessee game. I never play money lines of minus 300 or higher anyway, so when you factor that out, it was a different story. But whenever the money line edge for the ATM was 2.5% or higher, we saw profit, so I am using that as our key for money lines this week. For the standard margin error, it was actually the dollar that was the best in week 1, but the ATM was not too far behind at 10.89. So you're probably wondering why the ATM did worse than the blender, even though the ATM had a better standard error. And that's because the blender is very good at the extremes, the high spreads, and the mismatches. The ATM is a lot more moderate, so the blender does better at picking out the extreme games, which is why it did better in week 1. But the two complement each other, especially going forward. Moving on to the week 2 plays. Starting off, we got Marshall and Boise State, Friday night game. My model thinks this is going to be about Boise State by about 18 or 17 to 18 or so. So at minus 12, I think there's value for them here. It's a clean sweep on the spread. Now be careful when my model shows a clean sweep. When there's a clean sweep, my model wins more often than it loses, but it's not a slam dunk. There's a lot of losses in there as well, because a lot of the times it's like that because Las Vegas knows something that I don't. So always be careful, but it does win more than it loses when there's a clean sweep like that. ODU and Virginia Tech, revenge game for Virginia Tech this year. I don't think Old Dominion's going to sneak up on them this year because they looked really bad in their opener against Norfolk State. Virginia Tech didn't look good either, but I think they should be able to handle Old Dominion at home here. My model thinks the margin's going to be about 31, so at 28, there's a little bit of value on VT. UAB Akron. I think UAB is getting too much respect here. They lost a ton from last year. Akron didn't look good against Illinois, but UAB looked terrible against Alabama State, so I think 9 is way too many for UAB here. My model thinks it'll be between 4 and 6 for UAB, so the right side of 7 for Akron. Army and Michigan, this is one of those weird games before the year started, but after Army's week 1 performance, you have to be skeptical about them. Michigan didn't look that great either, but I still think they'll be able to handle Army here. My model thinks it'll be somewhere around 23, 24 for Michigan, so just a tad of value for them. Just a tad, but some value for Michigan. Enough to make a play on because the key right here, the blender, is higher than 1.5. Vanderbilt and Purdue. Vanderbilt, they looked okay against Georgia. They fought, let's put it that way. Purdue ran out of gas. So what's going to happen here? 7.5 is too many according to my model, who thinks Purdue is going to win by about 4 to 5. So the right side of 7 for Vanderbilt. Also the money line. The ATM key is higher than 2.5%, so the money line at plus 230 is a good play for Vanderbilt as well. Rutgers and Iowa. Lines at minus 20.5. Rutgers looked pretty good against UMass, all things considered, but Iowa was able to get it done against Miami of Ohio. My model says Iowa by about 24, so right side of 21 for Iowa. West Virginia, Missouri, prime letdown spot for Missouri after their loss to Wyoming. West Virginia, we don't know anything about them yet. They beat James Madison, which is never a bad thing, but we'll see. This is a prime letdown spot for Missouri, so 14 might be too many points, and my model agrees. My model thinks it'll be closer to 7 to 10, so the points for Virginia, it's a clean sweep for them here, the spread and money line at plus 425. Cincinnati, Ohio State. I think Cincinnati defensively will play well, but offensively, I don't think they'll be able to get it done. I think Ohio State will pull away in the end. My model says between 17 and 19 for the Buckeyes, so the right side is 17 for Ohio State. Although I don't think it'll be a bad idea to throw just a tad on the Cincinnati money line because there is value there. This is going to be a boom or bust game. Either Ohio State wins comfortably or Cincinnati wins outright. One or the other. Northern Illinois and Utah. Now, Utah has a lot of hype for them coming into the year, and they did beat BYU pretty easily on the road, but I think that had more to do with BYU sucking and pressing the issue too much than Utah playing well. Northern Illinois plays a lot more conservative, and I think they're not going to press the issue like BYU did if they fall behind. I think they'll just be content with losing by less than a lot. So 21.5 for Northern Illinois, especially with Utah's offense as shaky as it is a lot of points for Utah to cover. So that's why my model likes it a lot. It doesn't think NIU is going to score a lot, but same with Utah. Utah by about 15 to 20 for my model, so Northern Illinois is on the right side of 21. South Florida, Georgia Tech, it was a wacky game last year, but both teams are kind of resetting this year. My model says Georgia Tech by about 8 to 10, so the right side is 7 for them, especially after South Florida looked terrible in their opener. And Georgia Tech, all things considered, I don't think they looked terrible against Clemson. They had some bright spots. Nebraska, Colorado. My model says this is a dead even matchup. 37 to 37, 32 32, 35 35. That is dead even, so the points are very valuable for Colorado here, as well as a money line. It's a clean sweep for them. Nebraska looked awful against South Alabama, and Colorado did better than expected against Colorado State. So I think Nebraska's getting too much respect here. They haven't proven anything yet, so why are they getting so much respect? Appalachian State, Charlotte. This is a weird game. Even though my model says it's a clean sweep here, Appalachian State by about 26 to 27, how much of my model is factoring in Appalachian State from last year? That's the issue with these preseason numbers and these estimates before you get a big enough sample size to use this year's data in, is that there's too much influence from last year still, and I think 22.5 is a big number here for them to cover. I don't think they're as good as they were last year. So we'll see. They both played FCS opponents in their first game, so we don't know anything about them yet. But I don't know. If I wasn't playing off my model and was playing my hunches, I wouldn't play Appalachian State here. But like I've said, don't play the hunches, play the numbers. The hunches don't win you money, the numbers do. So I have to trust my model here. It's right more often than not, so I have to run with it. Mississippi State, Southern Miss. My model is in universal agreement here at 41 to 20. So at 17, I see value on Mississippi State. It's a near clean sweep for them here. They looked okay against ULL to start the year, but we'll see. Florida State and UL Monroe, letdown spot here for Florida State. Again, this is one of those teams where you wonder how much of the previous years are influencing Florida State's numbers here. My model says they'll win by about 22 to 27, so the right side of 21 for now, but we'll see. It's a letdown spot, but they should be able to beat ULM off talent alone. Wyoming and Texas State. Well, talk about getting no respect after beating Missouri. I think 7 is too low for them. My model thinks it's going to be closer to 9 to 13 or so. So the right side is 7 for Wyoming, not just the spread, but the money line as well. A lot of value there. Which makes sense. Texas State didn't show me anything that they're any different from last year against Texas A&M. Their offense looked awful. So Wyoming at -7 I think is a good value play. SMU and North Texas. Now SMU impressed me a lot in week 1. I don't know how good Arkansas State's going to be. They lost a lot from last year, but SMU played very well in that game in my opinion. Even though they were underdogs, they won by 7. They played well. I think Shane Buechele is going to be a good one for them. And I think UNT is getting a bit too much hype because of Mason Fine, but he's one player. I think SMU is a more complete team here. My model agrees. They think they'll win by about 6. So it's 3.5 is a good value for SMU. BYU and Tennessee. Now, the thing you need to worry about week 2, the overreactions from week 1. And this is a prime example right here. Yes, Tennessee lost to Georgia State, but can they turn it around? BYU didn't look great either in their week 1 game. So here's the deal. Can Tennessee turn it around? I think they can. My model thinks they can. My model thinks they'll win between 6 and 8 points. BYU did not look great against Utah, and I think Tennessee has a better chance to turn it around. Now, one of my big plays in week 1 was on Tennessee spread because my model liked them. So how much of this is because of those massive preseason expectations that all these influencers had for Tennessee, inflating their number once again against BYU? I don't know, but I think 3 is a good number for them to cover, 3.5. Florida Atlantic, Central Florida. Florida Atlantic, you got to give them credit against Ohio State. They could have just quit after falling behind big early, but they fought to the end. UCF played a bad Florida A&M team. We don't know anything about them yet. My model says UCF by about 14, so 10's a good number for them. I think that's about right. I don't think Florida Atlantic is a team that can stand up to them, so UCF is a good play at -10 here. Western Kentucky, Florida International. Now, Western was the only team to lose to an FCS team in week 1, and Florida International had a lot of hype coming into the year to win Conference USA, but they looked terrible against Tulane in their opener. I think the 7.5 is more of a reflection on Florida International's incompetence against Tulane than it is Western Kentucky's. That's a low number for Western, but my model likes it. My model thinks it'll be between 4 and 6, so Western here for the spread at 7.5. Liberty and UL Lafayette. My model likes Liberty here. They think UL will win by about 11 to 13, so not a lot of value on Liberty, but it's a clean sweep for them, so you have to take them. Western Michigan and Michigan State, in-state game. Michigan State's offense looked really bad against Tulsa. We don't really know much about Western yet, but even if Michigan State plays well defensively again, Western at 16 points is a lot here. I don't think they're a bad team. My model thinks Michigan State by about 14 to 16, so a little bit of value on Western. Not a lot, but some. Tulane and Auburn. So 2 stories here. One is, did Tulane's domination of Florida International, is that a sign of things to come for them? And then Auburn beating Oregon, will they have a letdown after that one, after that emotional win, playing against a team like Tulane? Well, my model thinks Auburn's going to win by about 21, so the right side of 21 here at -18 for them. It's a clean sweep for Auburn. I think Tulane's formidable, but I think Auburn ultimately will lay down the law. But I think 18's a lot here. I don't feel great about it, but my model says it, so I play it. Arkansas and Ole Miss. Now, Arkansas looked really bad against Portland State. Ole Miss looked bad offensively against Memphis. So I think one thing people aren't talking about, though, is Ole Miss's defense against Memphis. It played very well, and I think that's why my model thinks they're going to win by about 9 to 11 here. Arkansas's offense was just terrible. As long as Ole Miss's defense plays like it did against Memphis, I think they can cover the 7 here. Not just the spread, but the money line as well for Ole Miss. Buffalo and Penn State. Now, this is another one of those overreactions. How much of Penn State's dominance was because they were playing Idaho? We'll see. Buffalo lost a lot from last year. They're not as good as last year, but 29.5 is still a big number for Penn State. I think they can cover it. My model thinks so too. They think they're going to win by about 34 or so. But Buffalo's still not terrible. So we'll see about this one. This is one of those things where my hunches says stay away, but my model says play it, so I got to go with my model here. Eastern Michigan and Kentucky. Now, same story last week. My model is all over Kentucky against Toledo, and I was like, no. My hunch was saying no, but my model is saying yes, and my model is right. Kentucky covered pretty easily against Toledo. I think they're playing a better team in Eastern Michigan this week. My model says Kentucky by about 18 to 20, so at -15 is a good play. Again, my hunch is saying no, but my model is saying yes, so I got to roll with them again, right? Texas Tech and UTEP. UTEP is just really bad, and their game against Houston Baptist is really bad. Texas Tech, we don't know anything about them yet, but they should be able to beat a really bad UTEP team by 35, in my opinion. My model says by about 34 to 38. My model says by about 34 to 38, so going with a blender here, I think they can get to about 38 or so for Texas Tech. Cal Washington, revenge game for Washington. My model has a clean sweep for them. Universal agreement at 37 to 16 estimated score. So at -14, there's value for Washington here, and I think they can cover it. I was impressed by what they did against Eastern Washington, especially considering Eastern's games in the past. They usually play pretty well in those, so a lot of value on Washington here. Minnesota Fresno State. My model says this is an even Stevens matchup, so the points are valuable for Fresno. They looked okay against USC. We don't know anything about USC yet, but Minnesota did not look good in their opener. So in a revenge game for Fresno State after their loss to Minnesota last year, the points are valuable, not just at +3, but the money line as well. Ohio and Pitt, this is a straight Ohio money line play. Nothing there on the spread, but the money line shows value for Ohio, which makes sense considering Pitt's going to be in a letdown spot after their Virginia loss. Coastal Carolina and Kansas, money line play for Coastal. Nothing on the spread, just the money line. Coastal, I thought they fought pretty well against Eastern Michigan. Their offense had some bright spots. Kansas, meanwhile, looked pretty pathetic against Indiana State. Last one is LSU and Texas. It's weird. My blender and ATM are in total disagreement on the spread here. The blender favors Texas, but the ATM favors LSU, so I skipped the spread there. But the money line is all over LSU. I think they're the better team here. I think they're going to win, so a lot of value on the LSU money line here. And if I didn't mention a game, it's because my model saw no value on either the spread or money line, so those are the games I'm playing. And here is a roster of all my plays this week. I am risking a total of 20.5 units. And I chop up my units to where I don't risk any more than 1/5 of my bankroll for the week. So that's why I have them divided up the way I do. That's the rule I always run with. Risk no more than 1/5 of your bankroll per day. 15 units out on this spread, 5.5 on the money lines for a total of 20.5. These are the plays for the week. I'm heading up to Las Vegas again for the weekend, and I'll be back with a recap on Sunday or Monday. Good luck to everybody this week. Until next time, this is Sports Betting Truth signing off.